Do you feel like that labeling, that talking about what I do is something that is oftentimes emphasized more in the United States because people are so concerned about job equaling identity and paycheck equaling job, and because I find that people tend to ask me very specific questions about where my money comes from, as in regards to the amount of time I exchange with my artwork.
Right.
And I noticed that doesn't get asked of people who work in banks, people who are accountants. Nobody ever says to them, "Well, you think you're going to make it as an accountant?" But everyone says, "Hey, you think you're going to make it as a painter or as a poet?" And I'm like, well, that's so funny. Like, no one ever says that as a doctor. I had a friend who just recently graduated medical school. No one's saying to him, "You think you're going to make it?"
Yeah, and I know doctors and lawyers who didn't make it.
Yeah,
it's not a given that you're actually going to make it if you're a doctor or a lawyer.
Right, but no one ever says that to them.
No, they did not.
They always say it to
they
me.
did not.
I get asked regularly, and I feel like there might be really something there in the United States, that the way we associate what we do, our investment of time, as an equivalent to our survival and our monetary, and I think that maybe turns a lot of people off from wanting to pursue their dreams, their desires. They're very concerned about the paycheck.
Sure.
And it is, it's concerning from time to time, I will say, but I make it work and I figure it out and I do a lot of different things, but I feel like that is something that maybe people are off-put by that. They won't write a poem because they're scared they'll become in love with their poetry and they won't want to go to work anymore and they won't have a paycheck then, and so they don't write the poem.
Yeah, well, we've gone from what is creativity to what is identity, which all if you listening out there, if you check out The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, you'll find that these are the topics in the book. We're recovering a sense of identity, or recovering a sense of safety, or recovering a sense of abundance. So this business of identifying yourself as a poet, and then moving into the work conversation, or the entrepreneurial conversation, or the business conversation. I think that it may well be probably U.S. centric.
Right.
And maybe some in Western Europe, because Western Europe is pretty ambitious, especially in London, for example. People are very busy there. Not so much in Paris. People tend to have a 35-hour work week, and they do stop and have their wine and eat their dinners and whatnot. So they're not as driven to make a living out of their art. And I think that's what Van Hassel was talking about.
Right.
It's like, hey man, let's don't turn this into a work thing. Just let it be what you do.
Exactly.
And drive your taxi or work your job at the boulangerie or wherever you are, and don't worry about it. But I do think that it's particularly concentrated here because America is a workplace, and America is all about work. What work is, what work is not, what work we do, and our identities as Americans are deeply tied into our work. And we are asked to train ourselves to do more than just earn money. We're trained ourselves to participate in a community as citizens who work. And as a result, we have a lot of benefits. People buy your work, they buy my poetry, our work allows us to do a lot of things. Unfortunately, it's quite circumscribed. The lawyer, the doctor. In Time magazine this week, there's write-up about technical schools and how popular technical schools are becoming, which I think is great. You learn how to be a carpenter, or you learn how to work in the dental office, or you learn how to work on an airplane. And you can get a job and you can go work and stay in your profession for the rest of your life and earn a good living. And because of the nature of art, making art, it requires so much abstraction of the real into the surreal, and then turning it back into artifact that moves somebody emotionally. So the minute you pick up a pen or the minute you pick up a piece of a painting, a brush, the brush in a sense is like a magic wand, and it kind of scares people a bit. And so I think a lot of that business of, well, you can't make a living as an artist, first of all, it's not true, because some of the richest people in this country are artists, and take Steven Spielberg, for example, or Martin Scorsese, or I'm not so up on the visual artists, but there are visual artists that pick up $1 million a painting.
Yes.
With
Okay.
well, it's actually easier
It's
to
true.
be successful as a creative in this country than it is to get an upper level executive job in a Fortune 500 company and be successful in a Fortune 500 company.
Because you remove the ceiling potentially
That's
of
right.
your income.
Yeah, and because the thing about art that people forget is art is entrepreneurial based, and if this country is anything, it's entrepreneurial.
Right.
And if you have enough grit and verve and willingness to hang yourself out there, like this afternoon, you invite me down here, and you have this wonderful session. Well, that's entrepreneurial. You had to call me up. I had to be in New York. I had to say yes. You had to coordinate the time. I had to be willing to do it. And so here we are. So this is what makes success happen. So this conversation of whether you can be successful as an artist or not, it isn't about artistry. It's the same conversation any entrepreneur would have. Can you be successful in any business? And the answer is sure. If you show up, if you work, if you develop your craft, if you pay close attention to it, and you're dedicated and devoted and willing.
So to people who maybe have, less of an entrepreneurial spirit, potentially they're not interested in taking their art hobby from hobby to profession. They're totally satisfied in their job. Is there still value to them pursuing potentially a love of music or painting? I would say yes, for a lot of different reasons. I'm curious as to your input on that subject matter.
I would like to talk people out of doing art for commercial reasons, unless they really do have an ilk for being an entrepreneur. If you don't have an ilk for being an entrepreneur, do not try to go be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's like
Don't do it.
If you're afraid of the water, go walk in the desert. Forget that business of going commercial, because it's a whole conversation that's really unrelated to the joy of generating work.
The joy.
Yeah. And like with poetry, I mean, poetry is not an art form that makes a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, you can make money peripherally on it. You can give lectures and teach and get speaking engagements and do performances, and every now and then you might hit it with a video or a book. I can turn you to a lot of people who have made money, in the business of spinning off from the page.
Right.
But to write a book of poems and to expect it to become, the next Stephen King novel, it's probably not going to happen. I think that's a really good thing, because poetry will never be forced into the commercial context. So it becomes more of a joy, it becomes a pleasure, it becomes a way of engaging questions of divinity, questions of why we're here on earth, why do we do this? Then it also teaches you how to think, and it teaches you how to communicate, and it most of all makes you proud of yourself because you showed up for yourself. And that's true with it's true with poetry, because poetry can't be commercialized. It's also true with visual art, it's true with photography, it's true with any sort of opportunities that anybody would like to indulge in digitally. More now than ever, we can go online and have wonderful things happen.
Yes.
Improvisational work, performance, acting. You can act and never leave your house. You can become an elephant, and then you can become a spider, and then a squirrel, and then a whale, and you never have to leave the room. But it'll change your whole interior, and you'll be a richer, more lively person.
Right, that's something that I like to talk about. You could probably actually pronounce it more correctly than I can in French. The joie de vivre.
Joie de vivre.
Joie de vivre,
joie
yeah.
de vivre, you know, the
The joy
of
of
life.
life.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
it's
what
the
I
same
like to
in
talk
every
about
language.
a lot.
Because it really is it's in the eyes. When you have joy for life, it comes across in the face.
And I feel like that's what art gives to people, regardless of what form it takes, if
Sure.
they engage in that art form. And I like to talk a lot about the fact that I believe that everybody has an art, and it's the way in which they approach a certain aspect of their life, and it spills over into the rest of life, bringing
Right.
that joy. And like, I tell people a lot, you know, I'm a runner. I run. I enjoy it. It's hard, and I'm very slow. I am not fast, and I have run all these races, you know, that people from all over the world come and run, and they run it in half the time that I run it in, and they
you
win.
Run 26, right? I mean,
I ran a marathon one time last year. I
remember
did.
you were training for it.
I was training for it when I
Yeah.
took the class.
Yeah.
It was on my list of things to do in my lifetime, and another one is to go to Argentina and learn the tango, but that's another story. I'll get there someday. But yeah, I tell people all the time, I will never win. I'll never win. And these guys I work with, sometimes they say, oh, Courtney, you're running another race. You're running another race. How'd that go? Did you win? I said, no. I didn't come in last, but I didn't come in first. I came in right in the middle, but I had fun doing it. And I think, you know, what that gives me and what I learned from that and how that affects the rest of my life is significant. And I will never win, but I will have the internal gifts and rewards and satisfaction from that. And I think that in some ways that can be my art just as much as painting is my art, or as much as teaching is my art. And it's a lot of just how I approach it and what I allow it to give to my life. And so a lot of times when I'm having this conversation with others, that they're like, well, I'm an accountant, and sometimes I like to scrapbook. You know, and I'm like, well, what does that give to you? Like, how are you approaching that? Does that flesh your life out a little bit more than just, you know, going home from work, watching the tube, you know, whatever? And I think that having that thing to go to is so important. Just as you're saying, like, creativity is a DNA imperative. It's just part of us, and there's something that all of us approach in that manner, and then I feel like we can all nurture that.